Morning, everyone. Lovely to see you all, and welcome along to our session this morning. Thanks very much, Pippa. Just before we do kick off, just a couple of points just to raise nice and early. We are kind of monitoring the chat and kind of got the Q&A feature as well, so please do ask questions. We've kind of left some time at the end. We can't promise to have the answers, but you can certainly ask the questions. So please do use that feature. Also, we'll be using a Menti for the breakout sessions later. We'll talk about what that is and how to use it as when we get there, but just have your phone or a second tab available just so you can take part of that. And again, the session is being recorded and will be shared afterwards. So don't worry about scribbling notes all the way through. Today, and before we jump into this main session, a bit of a health warning, really. We've been looking and re-looking at our volunteering offer at the V&A over the last few years, but this is our journey. Today, we're talking about our experiences and what we've been up to, but we aren't going to present a blueprint. We have tried to embed as many different practical steps into the presentation, but we're also aware every organization has its unique challenges, opportunities, its own DNA. So while we'll talk about our experience and we'll try and put in as many different things as possible, we just want to make that really clear at the start. We are on our journey. That journey will always iterate and we'll always be looking to where the next step is. But we felt it was really important to frame today's session with that. Also important for today's session is to sort of introduce speakers today. So hello, if we haven't met, my name's Stephen Hill. I'm the head of volunteering with the V&A. Over to Fran.
Morning, everyone. I'm Francesca. I'm volunteering advisor at the V&A.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel and I am the volunteer manager at Young V&A.
Thank you very much both, and we'll hear more from Fran and Rachel a little bit later on. And as we're spending this morning together, it's worth you knowing what we'll be talking about. So we just do a little bit of framing initially, talking about the start of our journey and where we kind of have been looking. We will then talk about our different communities that we've been looking to improve how we connect and work with, and then the real meat of today's session is for you guys to kind of take on the mantle and in the breakout rooms. And again, we'll talk about that when we get there. So where did we start? I suppose just useful really to do a little bit of framing about what the V&A is and who we are. We could go back to the very opening of the V&A. Like most volunteer involving organisations like yourselves, we have always had an important role with volunteers at the heart of what we do. The volunteers at South Kensington are hugely knowledgeable and passionate about the collection, about all the things that we do, and also provide benefit of their experience to both our front of house operations and also our back of house teams working with the collection. So as we approached the huge opportunities of opening two new sites at Bethnal Green with Young V&A and East Museum and Storehouse in Stratford, it was important to the V&A that volunteers were embedded in these next chapters of the story. These new museums were hoping to connect with new audiences, particularly those hyper-local to the sites and from communities maybe not specifically served or represented by our South Kensington venue. So while we took the learnings provided by South Kensington, we wanted to explore our working in more detail. And in doing so, how this examination of volunteering at V&A could inform our practice across the family of sites. So we started by getting to know more about our programme and commissioned some research to better understand what we already had. In partnership with research consultants, we spoke with existing volunteers, volunteer managers from across the V&A, and externally. If that was you, thank you very much for sparing your time for it. And with those who don't volunteer with us, and those that have never volunteered, to understand kind of where our current position was. And while the research to us on the call today may not be throwing up huge amounts of surprises, there were two particular insights that are particularly foundational for our early steps in reimagining our volunteering offer. Generally, people volunteer at the V&A due to their familiarity and existing love of museums or a collection, passion for the building and space, an interest in topics like arts and history. They're loyal to the V&A and are longer-term committed volunteers as a result. However, for others who don't volunteer, we aren't as relevant. Some of the new audiences we wanted to reach were motivated by something more personal, a desire to help young people, to connect with their community, to facilitate learning between cultures and histories, and things that we weren't necessarily explicit in how we were talking and positioning volunteering and the difference that volunteers make. And for those that do know us, then that was the problem. We carry a perception of being elitist, and people worried about how they would fit in. Respondents spoke about worries of potential imposter syndrome and whether they would have what is needed to fulfill the requirements of the roles. Application journeys were hidden, and many guessed that they would be complicated, asking for qualifications over experience, for example, or passion. What is seen as by some our biggest asset, being the VNA, was the reason for other people they were switching off or finding it difficult to connect. So if we were to connect with the new audiences while also making sure we celebrate those who already give their time, we had some soul searching to do. And at this time, we came across a fantastic TED talk that's available on YouTube by Simon Sinek, and who speaks way more eloquently than I can. So I will butcher it now, but kind of essentially what his point in the TED talk is to think about for organizations to understand their why. Why do they do the things that they do? And in kind of the talk, he says that most of us know what we do and most of us know how we do it. But for an organization to truly flourish, every activity should be connected back to a common why. What is the golden thread that connects everyone? So we took this idea and we went back to our research to understand what is it that is connecting all those people that responded about what volunteering could be at the VNA. And ultimately, our golden thread, our why, was already in our organizational vision. It was creativity. People volunteer because they share a belief that not only is creativity important, but it's fundamental to our individual, collective, and social well-being. And there's a common ambition to share, champion, and protect it now and for future generations. So our vision for volunteering is not about helping the VNA to operate, isn't about us opening the door, but it's about sharing our platform to do something that we all believe in. So the next model we used as part of our program development was a model that we borrowed from Henrik Nyberg. And in this model, we are set a challenge of moving a car from A to B. Oh, I forgot about that animation. That was a bit of fun. Start with a challenge about moving from A to B. Obviously, a great way to do this is by car, albeit kind of sustainability, etc. But kind of it's efficient, it's comfortable. We know that that's a reliable way to get from A to B. However, to build a car can take a long time. And during this time, we are not going anywhere. We aren't actually achieving what we want to do. However, a skateboard, albeit basic, maybe a little primitive, will do the job in moving us from A to B, but might not be the most comfortable. So we can add some handlebars to improve it. Then we make a scooter, which then, do you know, it'd be great to sit down. So we develop a bike. What this also provides us to do is to make these iterative changes based on the learnings as we go. We're no longer fixed on what the solution should be, but we open up to experience guiding how we achieve our objective. It also opens us up to fail fast and build those learnings back into development. We don't have to wait months and years to realize we're barking up the wrong tree. It's okay to fail. And in fact, in this model, it's important that we fail and we take those learnings. So we had a kind of understanding of our why, and we also now started to look at a model to help us sort of experiment and build our kind of psychological safety in exploring our volunteering practice. We then wanted to look at each of these different communities in turn. And so Fran, myself, and Rachel will speak about each of those. And we'll start with our colleague and our staff community first. Because from that research that we did, an additional kind of outreach to volunteers, to volunteer managers and the wider VNA community, we knew that while those teams who have worked with volunteers, and particularly those managers and contacts for volunteers, they were familiar with the importance of volunteering. Our organizational confidence and awareness was inconsistent, particularly with the new model that we were looking to bring in. So we started to improve awareness of volunteering. And in the true skateboard spirit, we started simple, sharing a series of blogs on our intranet, telling people about the work we were doing in volunteering and why we were doing it. We shared our vision, what we knew about, what we did well, and where there was room for improvement. And after this, there was an all-staff meeting, perform a similar function as the blogs, but this time I had a little bit more of a captive audience. They couldn't quite get away. So we improved the awareness of volunteering by simple means and using existing channels. Now we needed to support the teams to develop their confidence in volunteering. And our first step was to connect those who work with volunteers together in a volunteering forum. The vision for the forum was a space for those who work with volunteers to come together to share and support. And it started strong. It was good attendance and generosity of conversation. But the forum became something that was difficult to manage for the volunteering team and became more of a distraction from other ways of working, which were proving really kind of profitable and engaging. So it was a good idea that worked elsewhere, but it was just not the right time for us. So we paused the forum. The skateboard approach allowed us to do this quite easily, with a view to revisit it at a future time when we had a tighter remit and slightly different situation. But what the learnings we took from the forum was that the teams wanted information. They wanted guidance. They wanted clear processes. So from the forum came the Volunteer Manager's Toolkit, which you can see here on the screen, an online resource taking teams through who involve volunteers or want to, outlining what volunteering is and how it differs from employment, the commitment to run a program, what the journey looks like from thinking of an idea to saying goodbye. It gave us somewhere to send people who wanted some information and understand our approach, allowing the volunteering team to focus our limited support with those teams in development and delivery of programs. And at Young V&A, Rachel was building an opportunity provided by the toolkit and offering volunteer culture training to colleagues who are meeting volunteers in their roles. It was important that they not only understood why people give their time, but also what to do and how they do it. Back to Sinnett's model of the TED Talk. Once you're clear on the why, the how and the what have a deeper purpose. So the training is a real example of how Young V&A have actually informed our multi-site approach, as this culture is something that we are now able to, culture training is now something we're able to deliver at all teams as part of them getting ready to work with volunteers. A skateboard doesn't always have to be simple. It can also be about the size of the group you're working with before rolling out to a larger group. And finally, on the skateboard journey, I wanted to reference a big change that we've adopted across several sites now. And from the early work we did about framing and the awareness around volunteering, we were actually able to position volunteering supervision within some job descriptions, for example, our front of house teams. This is not program management that sits with the volunteering contact or volunteering manager, but a recognition of the importance of volunteers in roles within the museum. We're transparent from the point of recruitment that this is part of the role and has been fundamental in defining volunteering at Young V&A as being something we can all share, celebrate a common language, and something we all share responsibility to make sure it's the best it can be. So that's just some points around our internal community, but we also did some work where we looked at our local community, and Rachel speaks about that.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, so I'm going to speak a bit about how redesigning volunteering helped us cultivate a new community of volunteers, which was our local community. So Stephen's spoken about some of the strong foundations we laid down, which were to better understand our why and why people would volunteer for the V&A and Young V&A. Meant that we could use these learns to develop our skateboard version of our volunteer program at Young V&A. So we're a museum based in the heart of Bethnal Green, which is in the centre of Tower Hamlets. And we wanted a program that would, the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, that is, and we wanted a program that would reach and better connect us with that hyperlocal community. And there were four kind of crucial factors that we wanted to highlight here when we were reflecting upon this journey. So the first was the use of user-centered role descriptions. So as a new hyperlocal museum for young people, we wanted to ensure that our role descriptions embedded Young V&A's mission and spoke to this new demographic of volunteers that we were trying to reach. We knew that they were more socially conscious, and we recognised that in order to reach and connect with this new local audience, we needed to have quite diverse roles and activities that spoke to different people's interests. So as a consequence of that, our four front of house roles were born. So these were our new volunteer roles at Young V&A, and they were called playmakers, change makers, story makers, and hosts. So those playful names were coupled with quite playful, dynamic role descriptions that were centered on the different activities that the volunteers would be doing around the museum. So you can see here really clearly it states what you'll be doing in the role description. But it also highlights what they'll get out of the role and the impact that they would have on our young visitors. So there is a resource that's coming up just now, which is a card sort activity that we used a lot of our open days, and we still do now, which allows individuals that are interested in volunteering to pick out all the activities that they like doing, and it suggests for them one of the 4 roles that they might like to do. And it's been a great way of putting the volunteer at the centre of the experience. And in the years following this, we've used annual feedback sessions and one-to-ones with volunteers to really iterate these role descriptions and make sure that they align with what the volunteers say that they're doing and think that they're doing, to make sure that they agree with their role and purpose, which has helped us retain volunteers, but also reach more volunteers from our local community as well. And this user-centered role description has been rolled out across our V&A family of sites. So here you can see a recent South Kent photography cataloguing volunteer role description, which starts simply with the headline, "Do you enjoy photography?" So this moves us nicely onto kind of our second factor, which was recruiting volunteers through behaviours over expertise or experience. So we wanted our roles to be as inclusive as possible. So we removed any kind of jargony museum speak from role descriptions, and we highlighted that we just wanted to see 2 things from applicants, and that was that they had a friendly, welcoming attitude, and a passion for supporting young people. And so we coupled this with applications that just asked for 2 questions as well, which was, why do you want to volunteer at Young V&A? And how can we work together as a team to create a joyful experience for young visitors? So really kind of putting that sort of culture-led ethos first. And we kind of used our selection days to model this as well. So we wanted both our volunteers and visitors to feel sort of relaxed and safe and comfortable in the museum. So these days were very sort of low stress, fun tasters. They focused on cultivating a team culture and providing that joyful experience. And whilst I think our selection days and our induction process has been the part that's been iterated the most, it's changed quite a lot, and we've tried to kind of constantly iterate it and improve it. Our sort of user-centered role descriptions and the behaviours-led ethos are kind of been embedded into this the whole time, and they've been really central and integral to us connecting with a new local community of volunteers. So going on to our third factor then, which is our flexible opportunities. So I know that so many people from kind of people I was talking to yesterday, this is something that people are rolling out, have rolled out, and it's a no-brainer for kind of reaching a new audience of local volunteers. But it was something that we really knew we needed to do from the outset. And we knew that the lack of flexible ways to volunteer with us were a barrier to reaching our wider community, competing with full-time jobs, the school run, or being full-time carers, and many other reasons why people couldn't volunteer regularly. So from the outset, we wanted to make sure that we had a flexible opportunity. So we stated in our role description that we wanted you to volunteer once a month if you could, or more if you wanted to, and but we were very clear in kind of our onboarding process that if you could only come in during the school holidays, that was totally fine. And we launched this new program without a VMS. So we didn't have our VMS when we opened Young V&A. So we used Microsoft Forms, allowing volunteers to choose an AM or a PM shift and book through the form. And we'd then send diary invites for an Outlook calendar. And whilst it was a little bit more time consuming, it was a huge factor in helping us engage and cultivate that new community of local volunteers. And we're really lucky now to have Assemble as our VMS. And obviously this looks a lot nicer than it previously looked. But we were able to implement a really effective version of flexible volunteering without the VMS. And finally, we were able to nurture kind of our community networks. That was our sort of final factor. And we did use things like our blog, our public blog, and our newsletter to promote kind of open days and opportunities that we had. But we knew we weren't going to reach people that weren't already invested in the V&A and the Young V&A through these channels. So we spent a lot of time flyering for our kind of open days that we hosted in a local community centre before the museum was opened. And we kind of nurtured relationships with lots of community partners to try and promote our volunteer program to their beneficiaries. So people that were trying to get young people and older people back into work, and kind of people that wanted arts experience within the local community. So the success of these partnerships was really greatly helped by kind of those flexible volunteer models, the exciting role descriptions, and also the fact that we were putting the volunteer at the centre of the experience and really kind of wanting to give them an impact and really feel the impact of the programme. So Our recruitment model has stayed this way in the sort of following 2 years. So I'm about to go out and recruit again. I'll be at Whitechapel Market next to the fruit and vegetables, going to Tower Hamlets Town Hall, where there's lots of footfall for local community beneficiaries. And whilst having a stand in the local community is nothing new, I think, again, the use of our role descriptions, our flexible model, and the behaviour-led recruitment has given us the opportunity to create that less intimidating environment, make sure that people we connect with feel like they really belong, and they can feel that kind of positive and supportive culture that we want to embed into kind of every step of the journey, from just meeting us at the open day to coming into our selection day to volunteering, hopefully for a long time. And so during this whole process, those strong foundations that Stephen mentioned of things like writing volunteer support into job descriptions, and giving volunteer culture training has meant that at Young V&A, specifically our floor managers, our front of house assistants, and our wider team have been really invested in this sort of positive, holistic, supportive culture and really helped to make it a reality. So I'm going to pass over to Fran now, who's going to go and talk about our third community.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Yeah, so following on from talking about our internal staff communities and also our local communities, I'm going to turn our attention now to talking about our volunteer community, both in terms of those people who are already part of the V&A and also those people who have been joining us for the first time. To do this, I'm going to be talking about 4 different tools we've been using to help volunteers feel part of not only sort of the wider V&A community, but also individual communities forming at places such as Young V&A. To start off with, let's start with volunteer news. Back when we first started opening our new sites, we were using site or team-based newsletters to share regular updates with relevant volunteers. And these worked really well. They're sort of quite standard sort of across the museums. And we've maintained them. They focus on local activity and very much have their own look and feel that reflects the sites, which you can see in the example of sort of a quite playful Young V&A newsletter that's currently on screen. We quickly realised, however, that there was information that all volunteers needed to know, no matter their role or site. So to help with this, we introduced an all-volunteer newsletter, which has just popped up on screen. These days, we've settled into a pattern of sharing these more frequent site-based newsletters that are then complemented by a quarterly all-volunteer newsletter. And we make sure that the latter one has updates from each site to reinforce this idea of one connected V&A community that's made up of these different parts. Staff members can also sign up to receive it, which really plays back and supports to that visibility piece that Stephen was talking about earlier. We're also very fortunate now to have that volunteer management system that Rachel mentioned. We use Assemble. Some people use websites such as Better Impact. Assemble's got a news channel that lets us share important news more quickly. We can direct certain news stories to specific audiences. And really importantly, it gives us a place where we can share lighter news stories such as volunteer staff interviews, objects in focus, mystery objects, reminders, things that may not fit into our regular volunteer newsletters, but have a really valuable part to play in terms of community building. Within our newsletters is an example of our next tool, which is our branding and tone of voice. It's not always immediately noticeable to everyone, but across all of our volunteer communications and resources, we're very intentional about how things sound and look to help us strengthen these volunteer communities. Our first step was to look at the language and the words we were using. This was something we had direct control over, and we could make some really, really simple changes. For example, instead of saying the V&A is doing this using that third person, we switched to saying we are doing this to help create sort of a sense of shared ownership with volunteers. And many of our volunteer materials, our policies, role descriptions, our website were quite formal, quite academic in tone. So gradually we've been reworking these to make them feel more warmer, accessible, more supportive, and also getting them to capture that site identity where it's appropriate. Branding has also played a really big part in these sort of dual communities I've been speaking to. Young V&A's got really distinctive branding. You've probably noticed it throughout our presentation. It's got bright colours, playful graphics, and Rachel uses this across all of her volunteer resources to reflect Young V&A is a museum that sparks creativity and joy. However, when we're speaking to all volunteers, we use the V&A's people brand. This came in this year. It's a visual identity that brings together staff and volunteers across our entire family of sites. You can see it in our all volunteer newsletter up the top and also in the purple slide that's just popped up, which is taken from our all volunteer induction. It's got a distinctive colour palette. It uses these lovely ribbon graphics, and it's also got the tagline, "Together we make it V&A." I'm going to move on now to talk about volunteer inductions. And this is very much something that's evolved a lot over the past couple of years, as Rachel spoke to. Have had a lot of different iterations. The first version of it, when we first went multi-site, was something that Rachel piloted at Young V&A, and it was a combined session that focused on information that all volunteers needed, and also had the information about the sort of individual role and site a volunteer was at. All of this made for quite a long day, and we realised that it wouldn't necessarily be practical for all teams to deliver it. This was largely because some of our staff volunteering leads in different teams, particularly probably behind the scenes, weren't necessarily or didn't feel as equipped or as comfortable to eloquently deliver all the information that was included in it. And that was things such as talking about our shared V&A values or parts of our volunteering policy. So because of this, we moved to a second iteration, which separated the two parts, and this is what's currently in place. Role and site inductions are now completed in person by the relevant volunteering lead for that role. It gives it a really much more personal touch. And then the core information that all volunteers need to know has moved into an online self-led induction that volunteers complete by themselves. The final thing I'm just going to very briefly touch on is National Volunteers Week. I'm sure it's familiar to many of you, and thank you to everyone who has helped support our Volunteers Week as well. It's one of our biggest opportunities for community building. We've always marked it, but the past couple of years we've developed a much fuller programme of comms and events to say thanks to the volunteers, to raise awareness and help volunteers connect with the V&A and each other. An example event that we ran this year was a craft session called Stencil and Stitch, and you can see a picture of it up on screen. It took place at Young V&A, was organised by Rachel, was supported on the night by colleagues from different teams, and really importantly, it brought together volunteers from all our different sites, including a very recently opened storehouse. It went really well. The sign-ups were a little bit lower than perhaps we'd hoped. So next year we're going to look at it a little bit differently, maybe choose a different location or a different type of craft. After Volunteers Week, we surveyed the volunteers and saw really encouraging results. Many of them reflected on how they've been able to meet people from different sites, from different teams, and really importantly, they felt more a part of the V&A volunteer community by having participated. I hope that gives a sense of how we're building volunteer community alongside sort of our internal staff ones and the local community. That's kind of the end of this part of the presentation, so I'm going to hand back over to Stephen to help wrap this bit up and also introduce the breakout sessions.
Thank you very much to both of you. So what we wanted to do was just kind of sort of shape, I suppose, how we've used this idea of skateboard to car kind of in various different ways and with different communities. And so kind of it will frame part of the work breakout groups as well. So kind of just to sort of reiterate really kind of an example of where we were kind of wanted to connect better with our internal colleagues and staff and how we to encourage confidence around volunteering. We simply started with those internal blogs, news using existing channels, and thinking about kind of how we might leverage those. Then everybody had the dubious pleasure of me presenting at staff meetings and various different opportunities to those bigger forums. Then we started to work with our volunteer managers once we sort of seeded some of that awareness, which then developed to the idea of this toolkit, again, taking some of the learnings and also the things that we let's say it, we failed. It didn't quite work as we expected. It will come back, but it wasn't the right time for it. But we took the learnings through to the toolkit, which again helps us now to put us on the trajectory where our future ambition is that we develop some kind of volunteer management academy for every staff member to go through. But again, within this, we also now have volunteering within the organizational induction, which every colleague, when they join the organization, goes to, and they hear about the importance of volunteering. So we've just grown it from each of these steps. And that's really what we want to take through into the breakout groups, is for you to start thinking and sharing, I suppose, around how you might want to, or where is your priority to connect with. We've identified these three communities. Which of these communities might you want to improve your connection with, or have you improved your connection with? What was the challenge that you were looking to overcome? And what is or was your skateboard? We said at the start, we don't have the answers. We're just sharing experiences. And that's kind of what we want from the breakout groups, is for everybody to just bring their own perspectives on how they might have changed a different connection with a different community. On the screen, you'll see a QR code. You can scan that QR code with your phone, or alternatively open a second tab on your laptop or desktop. Go to menti.com and put the code 85921379. And in there, you'll be presented with a screen to be able to pop your answer in. Bit of a challenge for you. There's a 200 character limit. So this is also a test on editing as well. So there we go. But we put a couple of examples on the screen there for you. So staff thinking about the blog example, and here we're talking about volunteers and this idea of potentially running a coffee morning. The ideas don't have to be certainly revolutionary in nature, but just that first step. What was it that you did, or what could you do to change your connection with those communities? You can either provide an answer from your discussions, or we're also conscious from being in breakout groups, sometimes it's very quick and time goes. So throw your own ideas in as well. This is a kind of a pot for us all to kind of throw our ideas in. And what we hope to do is to share these back to people afterwards and hopefully inspire and get collective thought across the sector of all the different first steps that you can take. So that's what we're doing with the breakout groups. Pippa, if you're okay to, yep, thumbs up. So we'll be popping you into those breakout groups in just a moment. Hopefully that's all clear, and Fran's popped the text into the chat. So if you do want to take a quick copy and paste into a document, so you've got real clear clarity over what that looks like. Fabulous. Excellent. Thank you very much, and welcome back, everyone. This kind of sorry bit of doing the presentation, we're not in those conversations to hear kind of what everyone's chatting about. So hopefully you've kind of been able to pick up and share some ideas. And we've been able to collect them through the Menti. So thank you very much for those that did kind of submit. What we'll do is we'll just share that Menti. They are anonymous, so don't worry. And the Menti link is still live. So if you are thinking, I didn't get a chance to say this, or so-and-so said something and it was brilliant, and I want to make sure that's recorded, do continue to kind of throw it in. The Menti itself is gonna be popping up on your screen. And who gave me the share controls? There we go. So hopefully there you can see some of the kind of things that you have all suggested for these things, and we're just going to kind of pick up a couple of them, and maybe if you've got anything to add, if it was your idea or if you've got something else that you want to add to it, then please do. Fran, Rachel, I'm going to kind of bring you guys into this, and if there's any ones that you particularly want to kind of speak to.
I think,
Oh, sorry,
yeah,
Rachel, after you.
yeah, well, I just the first one that really, one of the early ones that came through about approaching volunteers in our other sites and reserving 2 days a week there to book myself in and can share the day with them too. I just think that like is such a simple, easy thing to do, but just that people connection side of it, just like I think that's one of the most important things you can do is just having a really good in-person catch up with a volunteer, and often that's something that can really keep them coming back and help them really feel part of that community, is feeling connected with you and then you kind of connecting them with other volunteers just in the day on person. So such a lovely one, and one that I try and do myself as well wherever possible.
Yeah, I thought that was a really nice one as well. Another one that really jumped out to me was about someone commented in terms of staff community. Sometimes people just make assumptions about what volunteering is because they're not that familiar with the sector, or sort of what different volunteers can do, or the passions or the knowledge that the volunteers have. So being able to speak to the sort of like potential of what volunteering can be, and sort of speaking about your vision and what you want to achieve with volunteers. I thought that was a really lovely one as well.
Mm-hmm.
Stephen, didn't know if you
And
had
apologies, my mouse is not playing ball this morning, so it looks like I'm just scrolling aimlessly around. But I like this idea here where I've just lost it, but this idea that we're just bringing in a new model, a pool model, and we want to kind of see how that goes, and kind of how, and just keeping the faith, I suppose. And I think on this call there's a lot of kind of connection. We've all sort of tried new things, and it's about kind of just keeping that kind of conversation going, keep talking about the objectives of the role and how it connects to the overall vision. And the more that you can connect volunteering into that vision, someone else, speaking about their vision being relatively new for the organization. So thinking about how volunteering connects in, that's a really helpful kind of piece to take away. Excellent. What we're going to do is we're going to bring these all together and we'll share them as part of our kind of a digital tote bag so that you can kind of look at them at your leisure as well. They are anonymized, so just have a look at it. It might spark something for you in that spirit of kind of sharing today. So kind of that's really brought us to the end of us sharing our experience. We haven't had a huge, we haven't been able to kind of go through in full detail of all the different things that we have done. There's been various different things over the last few years, but the what we've tried to do is just touch on a few different kind of approaches more than anything, and also a couple of different ideas that we sort of worked through. Some of them worked brilliantly. Some of them we're on the journey of learning how they might best go. But we did want to leave some time at the end just to kind of pick up a few of the questions. So we've got 5 minutes or so now just to pick up. I think there's been some asked as we've gone along, and there might be some. And if we don't get a chance to finish all the questions, then of course we'll pick them up and share responses following today's session. But Pippa, there's a couple I think in the chat. Are you happy to throw them at us?
Well, there was a wonderful kind of reflection from Chris Wade. I wonder if you might be willing just to come on to the chat and kind of like share some of the reflections and questions that he had from it.
Yeah, it was quite a long question, wasn't it? Sorry.
Good.
I was trying to think how to get it into less than 200 words for you, but I think I was failing miserably. For me, it was just around the wider community thing. So, for instance, you have members, I presume, of the V&A, you'll have regular visitors and repeat visitors, you'll have donors, and you'll have volunteers and organisations, whether they're museums or charities. We tend to put people into pigeonholes and we communicate to them as if they're completely separate entities, but often they're the same people, very often in my experience, or sometimes anyway. And I wondered, in terms of building a community and building a sort of shared understanding, a shared purpose, a shared commitment to driving the V&A forward, how do you communicate with them as separate groups? Is there an ability internally to access each other's databases and have that crossover and build a community that actually is about participation as much as volunteering? So it can be doing really tiny things and it can be doing different things at different times. Whereas volunteering, we tend to think of somebody does the same role time and time again. I know you've done something more flexible than that. So I just wondered if you managed to sort of break down some of those barriers.
We have, it's fair to say, focused our efforts around the volunteering and volunteering identity and the approach to volunteering over the last few years. But that inevitably, as you say, Chris, has brought in conversations where people wear many different hats for the organisation, for the V&A, and that's for the young V&A. Interestingly, what we're seeing at the new sites, and this is kind of more qualitative than anything, is we are probably seeing people sort of connecting with us who aren't kind of maybe more of our traditional audience and maybe don't have an existing membership or potentially a repeat visitor in the same way that we would with our South Kensington site. So it's a real opportunity to broaden and sort of to have generative ownership over what the cause is and to champion creativity in all its forms. So we're really chuffed about that. But absolutely, from working in kind of volunteering and charities for a long time, I was quite used to get quite regular feedback from volunteers saying, well, you've told me this is a fundraiser, this is a supporter, this is a member, and this is a volunteer, and you're all telling me the same thing but from a different angle. And so we're really trying to be mindful of that and how we connect with it. So when we're telling people things as a volunteer, why are we telling them as a volunteer? What's the purpose? What's the call to action we want to take from a volunteer? And then where can we kind of ladder back to core messaging so that actually if we are sort of telling people in different ways, then at least we're kind of saying the same message and we're saying it for a purpose for that identity that they're receiving it in. We're still early days in our journey, and I think there's definitely more we can do in this space about kind of better understanding who we're speaking with and how we can make best sense to them, I suppose. But it is about we try to be purposeful when we're talking to them and volunteering and bring the wider museum into them through their other identities as well. It's a bit of a waffly answer, apologies, but that's kind of where we are at the moment.
No, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Chris. We've got time for one more question. Did you include volunteers in your development of the Toolkit Academy newsletters and events? maybe to Fran?
Yeah, Rachel, you and I can probably join this one. I suppose it's potentially necessary to sort of split some of these out a little bit. I'd say and also introduce another audience, another community, which is our internal staff colleagues. For things like the Toolkit Academy, we're very much talking to our volunteering contacts, we call them, basically our staff volunteering leads. So I always all of us want to be very user-centered. So when we were starting to shape up things like the toolkit, I went out to people and said, who were managing volunteers, and said, like, what do you want? What information do you know? Do you want sort of written down? Sometimes it was quite hard for them to answer because they sort of didn't know what they didn't know. But that was a very user sort of developed toolkit. And then I think for the newsletters and for the events, we were at a certain point where we just didn't have an all volunteer newsletter, so we wanted to get something out. But as we started to iterate that, we were gathering sort of feedback from volunteers through things such as Rachel's volunteering feedback sessions, and we're also plotting in plans for once we had something out there for a newsletter, we could then start going out to volunteers afterward and saying, what do you want this to be? What sort of news do you want to find out about? And then in terms of events, we also looked at, for Volunteers Week, we surveyed volunteers, said, what do you want from Volunteers Week for 2026? And we're going to try and stage some of those events. We also played back to our volunteer motivations that we'd been gathering during recruitment. We found out that a certain percentage of volunteers wanted to volunteer to help improve their sort of like potential job opportunities in the future. So over East, our colleague Michelle is staging an event to help volunteers talk about how they can speak of the skills that they develop through volunteering in terms of when writing job applications. So from that, we're very much sort of hearing from the volunteers and using their thoughts to help us develop what we're doing in the future. But Rachel, I don't know if you want to chip in on that as well, because
Yeah,
you've done so much feedback with volunteers.
I guess just from like a site specific angle at Young V&A, Fran, you mentioned we do our monthly newsletter and we do sort of we run kind of site specific events and socials as well. So
I don't know if
rather
it's me
oh,
having.
is it not working? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you,
I
Rachel.
can hear
Okay.
you. Yeah.
So we have an annual feedback session where we get all volunteers into a room, whoever can come, and we do an online version of that as well. And we ask them for feedback on have you been able to come to any of the socials events? What do you want to see more of? What do you want to see less of? What times are good for you? And obviously, that's hard to speak to everyone's preferences, but it just gives us a good trajectory to work towards, as well as with communication as well. Do you feel like there's enough communication? And often, a lot of people we get really positive feedback on kind of that monthly newsletter and that quarterly newsletter. Because people find it more difficult maybe to log in to assemble all the time to get their news. So yeah, it's just that's been, I think, a good way to help inform and direct where we'll go, gathering that feedback from one-to-ones and an annual feedback session. There's some quite
Wonderful.
specific questions coming through, Pippa, so I
Yeah.
wonder if we can connect with people afterwards and
Yes,
answer those.
definitely. We
Great.
connect to those. So thank you ever so much. I mean, we could have continued on. Your warmth, your playfulness, it's kind of like you epitomize what you're all about and what this talk is all about. So thank you ever so much. I've popped the link for the plenary. What a name. Inclusive volunteering will be the plenary, and I've popped it on the chat for you to link to. It will be starting at 10:45, but for now, just take all the applauses. And if you've got a minute at all, if I could ask if you could just quickly complete the evaluation poll before heading over, that allows us to get an idea in terms of like your feedback and thoughts in terms of the conference. But thank you ever so much, Stephen, Fran, and Rachel. That was wonderful.